Right, well, here we go. To another episode of The State of the Onion, Series 3, Episode 2. And this week we will be mainly talking about, are there any benefits to philosophy and the examined life? And for an explanation of all that, I'm going to turn to the panel shortly. Today we have Brian, Headless Chicken, Fur, Just a Minnow, Little Minnow, and Dave, Captive Tech. So thank you so much. Anybody out there, please use the link to join if you have something you'd like to add or you just want to join. And I'm going to hand it over to the panel straight away. Philosophy and the examined life. Anybody got a definition of any of that at all?
If I may,
we do need definitions. Go ahead.
If I may, and this will probably be my my most useful contribution tonight. For me, it's all sort of summed up by the difference between knowing how to think and what to think. And I think philosophy gives us the tools to examine how we think. And I think that is probably a dying art these days. And I think it is, it's a skill that we need to probably reintroduce and brush up a little bit on as a species. So, yes, how to think as opposed to what to think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, interesting. Headless, how are you today?
Good.
The examined life.
I would say don't stare too deeply into your own navel.
Okay, I see.
Because
you're a navel man. I guess.
No, it'll stare back at you, and then you'll miss things that you weren't paying attention.
Oh, I see. Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. Okay, there is some platitude about that as well, so that's good. Fabio?
Yeah. Okay. So, do I have to be the boring one?
And you have to be a bit louder. That's what you have to be.
Okay. So, do I have to be the boring one? Explain where the examined life notion comes from, or
I was hoping somebody would, but right now I'm concerned about your microphone. Have you got your right microphone on?
Yes, I think so.
You don't sound your normal peaky self.
Oh, interesting.
Normally, yeah, you're not sounding nearly Italian enough for me.
Okay, yeah, yeah.
There we go. That's better. Thank you. Yeah, so, examined life. I got it. I don't know where I pulled it from the back of my head, but I can't remember who said that.
It comes from Socrates, the Apology. So when he was being put on trial in Athens because he was deemed to be somebody which was corrupting, the young children and all that stuff. He in his book, The Apology, said the unexamined life is not worth living. That is where it comes from. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, it's basically a Socratic concept. It is kind of a foundation of what he he was teaching and everything. And basically, it's so that as a self-defense mechanism against common behavior or the status quo of how people live their life, etc. So it is still an interesting concept. I because it's a mixture of what people should think and how they should think, but it's mostly um, introspective in nature, and the end goal would be to actually better your life by asking yourself, uh, what do I really know? What is but the big question: what is justice? What is goodness? What uh, should I binge watch this series because everybody does that, or is it filling a void? It helps you understand anything else. So it's a constant process of questioning yourself, why you do things, how you do things, where they come from, etc., etc.
Mhm. Thank you very much. Okay, Socrates. Minnow, over to you. Anything you'd like to just say on what you think about philosophy, what it is, and maybe and what the examined life means to you?
Well, philosophy, as defined by Cambridge Dictionary, is the use of reason in understanding such things as the nature of the real world and existence, the use and limits of knowledge, and the principles of moral judgment, which I do think leads itself to examining one's life. As yeah, you can examine others' lives with it, but I think, yeah,
Okay, thank you. Always good to go to a dictionary.
you
And
know
over
me.
to you. Over, yep, that's fair enough. Over to you, Dave. To
Well,
you.
yeah, I think philosophy is a useful tool for, like others have said, examining your life, your beliefs, the big questions. Why are we here, and everything. That's all good. I think, unfortunately, though, especially with a lot of the philosophers we're running into these days, it's more about presup and it's more about winning an argument rather than examining it. And I agree with maybe Fabio or Brian. I don't remember who said it first, but yeah, we do need to be able to examine and explore the arguments rather than just trying to win the argument.
Hard agree.
Indeed, indeed. Philosopher Rose, love that term. Yep, I've heard of it recently as well, Brian. Yeah, so
It's a new one on me. I love it. It just paints the exact picture that you need.
Philosopher
Yeah.
Rose, yeah.
Yeah.
They're a little bit too picky, is
Oh,
what I get from that term.
Going back to what Headless was saying, I think they've probably stared into the void a little bit too long. Some of them.
Yeah.
They've raised a good point. I mean, the weaponization of philosophy is, it's pretty pathetic, and it's basically what makes philosophy really unpractical. I mean, if I want to, if I want to win over somebody, there are better ways. I mean, a slap in the face is way better than a philosophy conversation. So. And I agree with what you said. Most of the time we see now philosophical conversation between people are aimed at at either owning the other party, or the idea that one party has of the idea of the other person, which is it's, if you think about it, it's a bloody brilliant concept, because people assume what and they try to dismantle your argument, not based on what you say, but based on what they think you are. So I mean, it's a total mess. It's totally impractical, and it's funny and pathetic at the same time.
And we should welcome all views, not just the folks that supposedly have the fancy degrees and are using all the big words. You have to have the regular people involved in the conversations too.
Well, and I think also that like the bros side of it, to me it seems like a lot of it is not just philosophy based, but like psychology, sociology based, and it's more the concept of like trying to manipulate others as opposed to like trying to examine oneself.
No, the bro side is pseudo-intellectuals using a spreadsheet and a flow chart to try to win an argument that they
That
don't
too.
actually understand themselves.
Right.
That too. Yeah.
And that's like
would
somebody
you,
mentioned.
would you agree or disagree with that?
I would agree.
I
Yeah.
don't
Okay,
think
so now I go down my flow chart. Thank you.
Overall, I would agree with that. Yeah, you can put
Yeah.
that on your flow chart.
Right, so now I go down my flow chart and ask my next question. Right.
But that doesn't necessarily mean that that's, that's one point of data. That's not.
Yeah. Oh, no, but they'll ask you 20, 30, 40 questions like this to come to the end that you're dishonest or something. It's like, no, you asked questions that lead to that. They're all leading questions.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it'll come back to, well, you said earlier, and it's like, well, yeah, that was to a specific question, though. That wasn't to all the questions, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is starting to remind me of Calvinism.
How so?
Just the way that you described the weaponization techniques. The flow chart and earlier on you said, therefore, can't trust anything else you say going forward because your answer to this specific question in this specific circumstance leads everybody to this conclusion about you as a person. Therefore, sorry, no, that's just Calvinism 101.
That's why I have such a problem with like all of the like Jubilee debate type channels and stuff when they have because I feel like it's never a genuine debate. It's always disingenuous on someone's side, if not both.
It kind of depends on the debate channel itself, I feel, because welcome Scott. Kind of feel it depends on the debate channel. Some debate channels are better than others. It's hard to get a title for a debate, and I think a lot of the debate channel problems is they do not put enough energy into clearly defining what the topic is that they're trying to debate, and they have some ambiguity in the debate title, and that just leads to confusion and cross-talking. So I do feel that getting a debate together is quite a difficult process, and one of my main criticisms, for instance, of modern day debate is that they have these ambiguous titles, which is better. Like as a title in a debate is just almost useless because that's obviously just asking for an opinion, and an opinion is not something you're going to easily debate. Go ahead, Fabio.
Yeah. There is also the fact that questions like that imply some sort of tribalism.
Yeah.
Which is kind of the well, I wouldn't say the antithesis, but so the examine life is kind of an antidote, to tribalism, where the tribalism itself overrides, critical thought, by applying, the concept of the examine life, that you should be able to override that concept. But the moment you start a conversation which is best, you already lost the plot, you're way out of there.
Yeah. It brings up the question then also. Actually, let me just say hello to Scott first. Hello, Scott. Good to see you.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, you're coming through loud and clear.
Awesome.
Is there anything you want to just add quick to the first on the topip at hand? Or?
Well, the examined life. Of course, we're all assuming the examined life is quote unquote philosophical in nature, where you're following certain philosophical schools or philosophical ways, like everybody should have an opinion on philosophy of mind or consciousness or whatever. I shouldn't say we're all, but I think a lot of people approach it that way. But remember, the examined life can also be psychological, reflective. It can be about, okay, in my career, did I make the right choice in 1983 to go for a particular way, and if I regret my decisions, what made me go that way, and what can I do to lead a fulfilling life and then lead a life that is of benefit to others. And so I would say that the examined life is the unexamined life is not worth living in the sense that it's really kind of a personal death, in that you become rigid, you become regimented, you become inflexible in your ways of thinking, because you have to go through some personal painful work on several levels, to break through, to say, well, what has been impeding me, what has been misdirecting me, and what has been, making me miserable, in my life. And you have to go through some self-examination, and maybe the examination of others, which is painful. Anytime you've received criticism, it can cause you to lose sleep, for a few nights, to say, well, is what they're saying true? Is it false? How do I know that? And I just don't see people who haven't gone through personal growth that way can live a fulfilling life, unless maybe you're Donald Trump. You have no sense of internal self-awareness, and you have a lot of money and lawyers, and maybe, but I don't know what he experiences inwardly. But I don't want to turn this into a political discussion, so I'm going to end it there.
Thank you so much for not turning it into a political discussion. Having turned it into a political discussion. Yeah, okay, so a couple of points I want to say there, which is, in the title I've put the examines life, right? Because I was wishing, obviously I wish to imply that Socratean thing. And you changed it to unexamined life is not worth living, which is the proper phrase for it.
Yeah,
right. Yeah.
And there is some difference between just saying I'm going to examine my life and just pointing out that if you have your head in the sand, you're probably going to miss quite a lot of your life anyway. So
what I'm saying is, yes, the examined life is worth living, but don't expect it to be a painless life.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Well, that's what I was going to say.
So the point being is that by that phrase, the unexamined life, that's like burying your head in the sand, and obviously you're going to miss quite a lot. Whereas if you're at least conscious or looking about, that's going to raise questions, and it's the questioning that is the point about the unexamined life. Socrates famously walked around Athens and the Agora, asking questions of everybody, rarely giving answers. And I don't know if you know anybody like that, but they're fucking annoying.
Yeah.
But at the same time, so we understand why he was executed.
Yeah.
But nonetheless, it's important to question yourself. I think that's the point there. Question your motives constantly, and question why you have the motivations you do. So
and be able to laugh at yourself.
That obviously is a benefit, because then you're not taking it too seriously.
Right.
But in this case, I don't think there's anything about whether it's serious or not serious necessarily. It's about the object of questioning yourself. And for that, of course, philosophy plays quite a large role, because it at least gives us a chance to have a defined method of doing that, which is consistent, right? If we know we're using metaphysics and logic. Go ahead.
No, I mean, I just want to say that, I don't know if it's the point that you want to make, but you made me think about, when you were talking, that maybe the right way to approach is actually the original version, where it said, that unexamined life is not worth living. What I mean is that sometimes, and maybe this is something that Scott hinted at, or Dave maybe before. Sorry, it's just a blur. If you dwelled too deep, in examining your life, you might end up with a more miserable life than the one that you were living before. So what I'm trying to say is that you should not live an unexamined life, but I don't know, maybe constantly going through every action that you do. Well, first of all, it's impractical, but it's also very annoying. But I mean, it's not a good way of living. You know what I mean? Constantly examining everything you do. Oh, is it going to be better for my life or not, or whatever? So the approach, what I'm saying is the approach is different. Do not live a life which is unexamined. But I don't know if living a constantly under scrutiny choices in your life it's better. I would hardly think that that's the case.
Yep. Anybody else want to add on to that? You were going to say something there, Minna?
I was just thinking about like how it's an uncomfortable process in many cases in which to examine one's own life. And I think that is why a lot of these bros and that sort of shit is so appealing to people, is because like that's comfortable. That's patting yourself on the back. That's not doing any, you know what I mean? Like I don't know. That was just a fleeting thought that I had, but back to what you were saying.
Yeah, well, like I think there's a lot of misunderstanding about the process of or philosophy, love of wisdom. There's a lot of misunderstanding about it. So, I think what
Yeah.
it's designed to do is not to give you answers. This is the misunderstanding as I see it. A lot of people that are early into philosophy think it's going to give them answers. And I don't think it gives them answers. It doesn't give you answers, but it's more like a tool that you can use to find what answers you may be sympathetic with, shall we say.
Yeah, it's like what Brian was saying.
Sure, and then and that means that the examined life just means that you're going to keep questioning what you are happy with once you have the tool to question. So I think those two things go together particularly well. But of course, the complacency is back to, that's the examined life part, right? Because it's, I think although we say the unexamined life, of course, what we're talking about is that the examined life is worth living. And what makes it worth living, of course, is the fact that there's so much and so much variation and so much depth upon which views you can place. That, of course, that, once you learn to manipulate the tool of philosophy, that you possibly have some way of clearing down to what is at bottom, or what you presuppose is the bottom, I guess. I'm always astonished about when I talk to people that have been doing it for 20 or 30 years, that they get to the bottom, or what I think is the bottom, very quickly, and then B, they show me that it's not the bottom. So, I don't think this is why I say there are very little answers in all of this philosophy. It's more about just keep diving down until you find somewhere where you can at least feel that you're close to bottom, I guess.
This is kind of why I was saying at the very beginning that it's all about giving you the tools to think with, as opposed to what to think about, your surroundings. And I think the examined life, as a conceptual entity, especially when you bring in that, I do love this term, philosopros. When you bring that sort of mentality and that sort of mechanism into the picture, it changes it, and you find yourself trying to see how you measure up to certain yardsticks, and that yardstick being, or the metric being, set by the peer group that you're currently in. And that, I think, opens the door to everybody's favorite pastime, purity testing. So yeah, and that, I think, is when you're definitely down the rabbit hole of what Headless was talking about of when the void stares back at you. So I think it's more of providing you with the tools to think and examining the ways that you think about things. I think that's probably, for me, that's certainly where the vast majority of the value and the benefits to philosophy are, rather than in any particular way in which they are those tools are implemented. And I think one of the traps is thinking that you can use these tools in the same way that you can, say, a spatula or a scalpel. These tools that we call philosophy have multiple uses and multiple abuses and ways to abuse the material that they're working with. And it goes back to the whole weaponization of things. And again, I'm getting very old, very cynical, very senile in my advanced years or advancing years. I don't actually trust humanity very much these days, and that's probably coming across. I'll shut up now.
Put my trust in the people, but the people let me down.
Oh.
So I turn the other way and I carry on anyhow.
Yeah, there has to be some mileage for a song in there somewhere, I guess.
Yeah, I think what you were saying is a tool is useful, but it shouldn't be an end all, right? Because we've known that just because something sounds good philosophically and something sounds good logically and something sounds good to your common sense, you get into science and they discover things like in quantum mechanics, and all that goes out the window.
Yeah, and then and after, I mean, even if you implement it in a way that's like has some utility, give it a couple of generations and that utility will have been subtly changed and manipulated into a way of exploiting something or somebody, and it's going to need a complete overhaul. As tools, we have to be. It's not the tool; it's the way it's used.
That's what we're saying. You can, like many things, it can be very useful and helpful, or you can use it as a weapon and club somebody over the noggin with it, right?
Absolutely. I mean, it's like when society was worried about magic being a thing. I mean, is it good magic or bad magic? Or is it the practitioner? And again. Yeah, I've just set my brain off into a spiral. It needs to think.
Yeah, so undoubtedly, there are people that do use philosophy in the way that people are saying, the debate bros type thing, rather than philosopho bros. I think they're debate bros, and I'm thinking of the power talkers, as we used to call them back in the day, that used to give each other graded belts, like it was some kind of martial art to use philosophy, and that always was distasteful to me. Although, however much fun it was to see people getting trounced in a debate argument, as some of the more unsavory theists used to get trounced from time to time, and I think we can all remember their names. But nonetheless, when it's used in a more positive way, of course, philosophy is the idea to me of philosophy is coming up with this like ethical and moral system. One of the points Savage made earlier, sorry, Minnow made earlier, was to say that it was about evaluating the morality of life and your attitudes towards that kind of thing. So I think that that's very important. I'm reminded of Spinoza coming up with an ethical system which was self-contained without necessarily mentioning or reflecting on the role that a certain deity makes or gives, which I think was an important step forward. So I do think that that process of self-reflection, i.e. the examined life, it can be very useful, not just for oneself, but also how you can pass it on to other people and make other people consider and contemplate what they themselves feel and want to do. And I want to put this question out to you guys, having been around the community for some time. How much have you learned about philosophy and the examined life, and how much has that reflected upon what you guys do? Anybody?
The examined life part is I've always been interested in, but hanging around with smart folks like you, Simos, and others, I've learned a lot about philosophy and laws of logic and stuff like that. I've picked up a lot of that recently.
Yeah, as I did when I first got on here, with obviously talking to people like Fabio and many others like Ozzy and.
Wow, I mean, if you learn something from talking with me, that shows how little you knew before. Because fuck me, Sniders.
There you go.
I think there's a wise man saying that you can learn something from everyone. So,
yeah, I mean, yeah.
Yeah,
I consider myself to be a challenge in that.
well, that's what I say. Yeah. Just you don't need just quote the brainiacs, right? Most people are not, at that level, right? Most of us are just ordinary folks going through life, but we like to talk about these things too. And the idea that well, you're just a simpleton or a dummy, you're not at our level to get in the conversation, I think goes partly on them, that they should want to involve more people in the conversation, but that's not what it's geared towards. And in defense of, so to speak, modern day debate and all them, they are looking for views. And that's why there's a good place for, smaller channels like we have and Simos and all the rest of us, where we can have these discussions, even though they may not be the most popular thing to get everybody in and dropping a bunch of money on the channel.
Oh dear. I don't even know what that would feel like. If only I could be in your shoes, Dave.
Well, I'm just saying, James is running a business. You know what I mean? So, for that, I try not to give him too hard of a time, because he's running a business. Now, there's a lot of smaller channels that do, more of the debates, what you're talking about, where we could actually have people, engaged and everything. Snake, we used to do them in the evenings. I wish he would do more of them. Some of those folks out there that, they have the great conversations, even though it's not, plastered all over modern day debate or whatever.
Yeah.
And Snake, if you're listening, I miss your debates. Bring them back. Snake was right, I think it is.
Yeah, Snake was right. He always gets an invite, but he hasn't shown up yet. So one day we're hoping.
Yeah.
One day we're hoping he'll come back. Yeah.
He does great debates, and he's very, he's interested in the conversation more than winning. I think he does a good job. I wish he would do more of it.
Absolutely. Okay, so Fabio, you said this here. Is that an idea true, or supposedly greater understanding worth the effort? What do you mean by that question?
No, I was replying to somebody on the chat before. I just wanted to take out there might be a misunderstanding that an unexamined life is a meaningless life. I mean, that is not the case. I mean, the general idea is that by questioning why you do things, why things happen, blah blah blah, all that thing, it should give you a greater understanding in general, of what happens to you, at you, in your world, in your life.
Hmm.
And and I was wondering, if that effort is actually worth, that remains to be seen. I mean, I can see people, living their life, without questioning themselves, and carry on hunky dory. So sometimes it makes you wonder, okay, why should I go through all this effort of well, putting myself, critiquing myself, all my choices, I mean, why I should do that? This idiot seems to be living a pretty happy life. Why should I go through that process? So,
Yeah, that was kind of speaking to the point I was making earlier in chat, which we ended up talking about Robbins and Robin philosophy. Yeah, there is. I mean, it is possible to live an entire life without introspection, and you have your childhood, you play around in your fields, and you go to school, and it's all fine. Okay, you don't do great in your exams and stuff, but you leave school, you go and work on the farm, and you marry the farmer, and it's all great. And yeah, okay, some people do lead charmed lives. We know this. And some people live charmed lives at the entire economic spectrum. So yeah, it's not a prerequisite for a fulfilled life. I mean, that all depends on what metric you're measuring fulfillment.
That's what I was going to say. Depends on what you consider fulfilled. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, salt of the earth, folks. Most people are just getting through life, and
they just do it.
At the end of the day, they can just sit back and on the porch and enjoy the rocking chair. Their life is fulfilled.
Yeah,
they're having a good life. Yeah,
they're comfortable.
I totally agree. I mean, from an economic point of view, that's the minimum effort and maximum result. So there's plenty of people which are busy. They keep themselves busy without questioning the purpose of being busy. So yeah, good for them. I mean, to each their own.
Yeah, who missed more, right? The person that sat on the porch watching the bees and the flowers, or the person that has a gold penthouse.
Yeah.
And there's also the perspective of who's better off, one of these that we just mentioned, or somebody who's examined their life and agonized over the various philosophical options and feels completely unfulfilled because they're not living a life that gives them the opportunity to do a lot of the things that they've philosophized about.
I mean, most of the people you ask, they will not tell you that their life is unfulfilled.
No, they won't.
So yeah, there is that.
Yeah, but
and actually, the funny thing is that, so in order for you to determine that your life is unfulfilled, you should start questioning your life. So you see the conundrum there, right? I mean, if you don't ask the question, you don't get the answer. And if you're afraid of the answer, don't ask the question.
Yeah.
It's a perfectly acceptable way of living.
The whole point I'm trying to make there, Fabio, is that, yes, how many people are there out there that have asked the question? And the answers that they're getting, the realities that they're discovering, don't sit well with them.
I mean,
and
you can also ask the question and lie to yourself.
yeah, that's true. That's
Huh.
true.
Is the grass greener? You know, a friend of mine, and congratulations to a friend of mine. He just got engaged. He's about the same age as me, and I thought he was always going to be, you know, single, no kids, and everything. And but he's always been free to go and just, you know, go off hiking and camping and traveling and seeing concerts and, you know, all these things. And then, but then he would say, man, I'm missing so much. You know, you got a wife and a kids and all this. And I was like, yeah, but I wasn't able to just go hiking and camping and traveling and go to concerts, right? So I'm looking at him like, hey, that looks pretty cool, you know, but yeah, ultimately though, you can't have, you know, everything, right? You have to take what you get.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, ultimately you do. You have to choose your life path. Yeah, you have choices to make. Absolutely.
And again, you know, I can weigh, you know, my entire life against small things like, you know, my wedding and the birth of my children, as, you know, when I just thinking of those things gives so much meaning to my life, right? That do you really need more than that? You know, those things are so powerful and memorable and wonderful. And yeah, can I be content with just that? Yeah, if I'm happy and everything, I think so.
Yeah, I think that it's whatever gives your life purpose and meaning is different for everyone, you know. I think some people are not content with that. Some people, well, like myself, I don't think that I would ever be. I personally wouldn't find any meaning or fulfillment out of like having kids. Like that's just not something that I've ever been drawn to. But like there are people who like that is their fucking soul. Like they had no direction in life until they became a parent, and then like holy shit, who is this person? You know.
And some go overboard. I've got friends with 10 kids, and I just don't know how they do it.
My brother's got 4. That's like too many. Don't get me wrong. I love all of my nieces and nephews. They're all great. I'm very glad that they are all here. It's just like, dang, 4 kids is a lot. That's all I'm saying.
Go.
I gave a piece of advice to a friend of mine that just got married and they were having a kid and everything. And I said, look, yeah, I know it's great, everything, but I'm just saying, not that it's going to happen to you, but my friend with 10 kids had a heart attack and they had to cut a chunk of his brain out of his head. Now he's got a little dent in his head. I said, now I'm not saying that's going to happen from having 10 kids, but you might want to consider it before you have 10 kids.
Okay, but explain the dent in my head then.
Yeah,
Well, we all have many dents. I mean, and that's some of what this point about the examined life really is, right? I also think that, you know, like you ask most people, and they'll say that their kids are very talented. They can't be all. They're not all kids can be very talented. I'm sure that that's a fact as well. So I do think that this idea of mental, you know, discognition. I don't know what the word is. You know, these mental flaws that we all fall victim to. That's yet another point about having or studying philosophy as a whole, because that is at least some bulwark against the idea of just accepting things for the fact. If someone says to you, their kids they're all very talented, but just in different ways, you know, they're not quite saying the actual fact of the situation, that they're giving you some social comment on how they wish things were rather than how things actually are. So I do think that we have these, you know, mental blocks, which in some sense the examined life can overcome. Right. So I think that's dissonance. Thank you so much. That is exactly the word I was looking for, Brian. And I think that's really important, because if you go through life not knowing these tools even exist, then you are more likely to fall foul of authority, or to authority, shall we say, that's just bending the situation for their own use. So that's yet another point about Socrates, isn't it? Or at least the point Socrates must have been making, is that in some sense that this is a vaccine against dissonance, cognitive dissonance. What do you guys think about that?
I would agree. But yeah, I don't know, I don't know that everyone is capable of that, I guess.
Well,
I think they've said before, in a way, I mean, you live a life, you're dealt a deck of cards, and you make the best use of what you have, and you try to question, okay, I mean, it's literally like playing cards, okay, I got these cards, what is the best way for me to play them? What is the best result that I can have, which doesn't mean you got to win. You might have, your goal might be just to have a really fun game, so yeah, there is that. But again, it all depends what are the things that have been given to you in this life, and you deal with them.
You can't have it all, so you have to take what you get. It's just being realistic. There's no way you can do everything. You can't experience 8 billion people's lifetimes. It's just not possible.
Yeah, there is a subtle difference between examining your life and being depressed. You know what I mean? So it's a slippery slope sometimes.
Well, and I think that problems occur when we start putting our own self-examination on others and vice versa, right? Or we measure ourselves up to other people's standards. Like, that's, it's self-examination. Sorry, I had a point that I was going to get to, but I've been having a rough day. Sorry.
That's
Well,
okay.
it's absolutely, like I said, like I said, I'm talking to my friend, and it's like, yeah, but you got all this freedom, and he's talking back at me, and it's like, well, maybe I wouldn't want all this freedom, so, well, what are you going to do? There's a happy medium, sure, and that's what a lot of us, have to do. We have to give time to the family, but then we have to give time where, hey, we want a night off, but you just can't take, the rest of your life off. You got to come back and take care of the family and feed the dogs and, do all your things, right?
Yeah. And I feel like for me personally, I came to a point of examining my own life and my own life philosophy when I found that I wasn't happy with basically the set course for me, right? I've talked about before where where I live and my family that I grew up, I was expected to basically get married in my early 20s and then start popping out kids. And when I was like, that's not something that I'm interested in, that's not something that I would find fulfillment in, that was when I had to start examining where can I find fulfillment, right? And if that had been something that was fulfilling and meaningful to me, then maybe I never would have gotten there. I don't know.
Yeah,
You just
well, that's where the vaccination comes in handy, because that's what philosophy can be in some sense against what you struggle with in your mind. I seem to remember using it early in life as well, in a different sense to what I didn't even know it was philosophy then, but I later found out it was, which is the existential crisis, which I think most people go through. And certainly I did. And I personally got over it by listening to Black Sabbath lyrics, which at the time I didn't even know what philosophy was. But later it turns out that some of it is quite deep philosophy. So thank you, Ozzy Osbourne. And if
I'm a Sabbath guy too. I'm a Sabbath guy too. Born and bred.
Okay.
If that doesn't explain some of why I'm like I am, I don't
Well,
know what does, but
I was gonna say, is that because you had a predisposition to be someone who does examine their own lives?
Yeah.
Or is it because whatever environmental factors led you to that?
yeah. No, I had that. I mean, my father taught me chess when I was
Yeah.
whatever 7 or something like that. So by the time I was 13, I was already playing at quite a high level, and so that idea of logic was kind of inbuilt then forevermore. And that's when I realized, or that's not much later, I realized that logical part of my brain was always pushing me towards philosophy. But it wasn't until I read, I think, a book on I think Rousseau or someone like that, Rousseau's autobiography, that I've kind of started, well, oh, there's a thing called philosophy. Oh, I didn't realize. And then started doing some history, and eventually found Bertrand Russell, and then kind of went, oh, this is interesting. And that's when I became more interested in counter-apologetics and realizing that my atheism was based in a little more than just the lack of evidence kind of position, or the lack theist position. That was quite an important step, I feel, as well, to go from having, not having reasons to reject God to having reasons to deny God. That was quite a big step, I felt.
I can see that. I
But,
guess my question was it this sort of series of steps along the way that like guided you to that, or was it that you just had a predisposition as a person that, like, for my own self, was it that I as a person had a predisposition to need some type of higher thinking in order to find fulfillment in my life? Or was it because I had two parents with somewhat advanced education, with my dad with a background in psychology, and various other environmental factors that led me to have this thirst, to have this hunger for this type of knowledge and this type of understanding and examining and just wanting to learn and understand things better?
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I had a disposition to it, like I'm saying.
You think you had
You
a
know,
predisposition?
already. I mean, I became an atheist at 7, somewhere around there, when I first discovered that I asked the teacher, what is God? And she mumbled through some kind of explanation. And then I realized that all of the things that she was attributing to what God was human. And I thought, well, that sounds more human than it sounds divine. So what is she even talking about? And then I equated that to Father Christmas and these lies that authority used to tell me. Right? So
See, I had the opposite. My parents weren't well educated or anything, but when I had a question, my mother would say, let's take you to the library and you'll get to look it up and find out. So I think that was, another way of influencing me to get the answers, because it's like, well, I don't know, but there's a place to find out. Let's go. And we'd hop in the car and we'd go up to the library. So I always appreciated my mother doing that for me.
She had that
Well-
thirst for knowledge despite not having the formal education. That's really cool.
All of this is reminding me of a joke. What gets bigger the more you take away from it? The answer is obviously a hole. But in my mind's eye, I've got this idea of as children, parents or teachers or somebody starts digging a little hole, in our brains, and sort of crams a little bit of knowledge in there, and the hole just sort of starts, the way that they do, you just sort of leave a hole unattended, it starts sort of crumbling away from the sides. And I don't know if anybody's seen the way that sinkholes form, and they just sort of
sink.
Yeah, it just sort of falls into itself.
Yeah.
And there's kind of philosophically, psychologically, kind of describes this drive to get more once you start. Yeah, I'm not sure it makes
Yeah.
sense either.
Well, it's you did say it was a joke as well.
Yeah,
So to be fair,
it starts off
also,
from the joke.
you reminded me of another one where I heard someone say, Ben Shapiro, it's like that old joke. It's like that old joke. The Earth rests on a turtle, and what's below that? It's turtles all the way down. I'm not sure it is a joke, but then Ben Shapiro said it, so fair enough.
Ben Shapiro.
Nonetheless, I'm also reminded of that. I was watching. Where did I get that from? Phil, Skydiver Phil. So thank you very much to him for his shows as well. If you're not subbed to Skydiver Phil, make sure you are. It's a fantastic channel. I'd like to welcome Sir Nicholas of Suter.
Hello, Nick. Good to see you.
Hello.
It's
Good to
really
see you
nice
all.
to see you again and back in a G Plus hangout. So
Thank you.
Are there any benefits to philosophy in the examined life? If anybody should know, you should. I feel.
If there are any benefits, I haven't found any, but that hasn't stopped me trying. It depends on what you want out of life. I think plenty of people are much happier not knowing, and that's why you had mentioned counter apologetics. And whenever I talk to people who are big into counter apologetics, I've noticed a tendency to try to push the counter apologetics onto others and say, well, religion is dangerous, with which I agree. Religion should be opposed, with which I agree. So I'm going to attack this individual and try to turn them into an atheist, which I think is in fact an attack and has to be avoided. But there are people who for whatever reason, sometimes even through trauma, maybe they were one way, then their whole family gets wiped out, their children get killed, and now they cannot and do not wish to examine their lives further. I think the answer to is the unexamined life worth living? In general, I would say no. I think we all tend to benefit from some examination, but there are degrees, and I think the answer is different to everybody. It also depends on how you get value. How do you define is it worth it? And that changes for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. In some sense, depends on those presuppositions, which you only get if you examine life. Which you only find out about if you examine life. I should say, not get, because you probably have them anyway.
But there you go.
Makes you
that's
realize
actually an interesting distinction there that we stumbled on, Simos. The examined hypothetical life, as in the concept of what can I do in these environs, versus what I am doing within these environs, what my actual life is compared to what my life could be given the exact same circumstances. So
yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, like, I just want to mention this because, like, what you just said brought it up in my mind, not because it's some deep point, but combine that with what Minnow was saying about my having a disposition in my mind to always question things anyway, just because I was a curious child. In some sense, and I've never really made this connection before. In some sense, I've always been an optimist, and maybe this questioning thing has given me some sense of optimism, in that it's naive to think that I can actually find the answers in the first place, and yet still I go on looking. So maybe that's given me the disposition to be an optimist, and I've genuinely found the unlimited resource of being an optimist is incredible, because even in the worst situations, although I still feel like I may lose or whatever, I never really get defeated by defeat.
Well, but here's a question. Everybody answering this question right now is self-selected. All of us would probably lean towards the yes, we should examine life question. If we didn't lean in that direction, we wouldn't be in this hangout. But I've met plenty of people who think that the Genesis, the tree of forbidden knowledge, is that concept is sacrosanct. That knowledge is actually evil. That you should either just be a farmer and go about your day to day, and be experiencing life. So I would make the distinction between experiencing life and or just letting life happen to you and or doing as you're told. That we should all do as we're told by authority, whatever it is. A much more sort of conservative Christian worldview. I mean, how much of that have people experienced? And people who at least claim and appear to be quite happy in that mindset.
No, that's a really good point. I hadn't made that association with the tree either before, and I think that's quite valid. Obviously, those books were written by authority figures back in the Iron Age. I'm guessing, like whoever wrote Moses's work, I should say, was probably one of the authorities, hence it being written in the first place. And therefore, maybe it is more a question of control, as many people have said in the past. Also, I think that this idea of questioning, or at least Socrates' idea, why they found it so abhorrent, and why they presumably put him to death, was because the idea of questioning is destabilizing for societies or small communities. It's so destabilizing, I guess, that it's worth the ultimate price. And maybe in these modern ages, with so much information flowing around, just a little bit of common sense doesn't really got you very far.
Well,
At least doesn't make much of an issue.
sometimes there needs to be a shake-up. That's all I can really say on that one. Sometimes you need somebody who's going to examine an aspect of society and say, well, actually, no, what we're doing here is not the best way of doing it.
Right. Who's the you you're referring to, though?
Well, there's a number of them. There's you, the person that's going along with it. There's you, the person that's questioning it, and there's the you that is the powers that be that's enforcing it.
Exactly.
It being the status quo.
Yeah, and obviously the status quo doesn't want people questioning it.
No, because the status quo just wants to remain.
Yeah. It's just for the point. I never liked Francis Rossi. An old joke for the boomers there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, Fabio, you're in your thinking pose.
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking that so what has been said recently, and I don't think that the concept of the examining life should bring to questions like, how my life might be, or something like that, or want to change society or stuff like that. I think it's a process which is really intimate. It might lead you to to some actions in society. Yeah, that might be the case, but I don't think that should be the end game or the goal of questioning the choices that you do in life.
And then again, we're then faced with, by what metric are we measuring success or failure at that particular?
No. But okay. So, but this is the part which I don't understand. The idea of questioning why you do some stuff has nothing to do with personal success or the society you live in or stuff like that. It's a you process. Okay, it's something that it should give enrichment to your life, to the way you live your life. You don't ask questions like, oh, I wonder what would happen if the society would pass that kind of law, or that kind of moral idea would be. No, that is not questioning. That is not the examined life. This is the
it's
examined society. That's
too
politics.
large a
which is good.
scale.
Yeah. So
Fair enough.
it's a you process. You should. I mean, you choose to make a job. You accept a job or whatever. You ask yourself, okay, why should I accept that job? Is that job something which is going to enrich my life, or is it taken away from some of the things which I deem are more important? Like, I don't know, maybe your family, your free time, your hobbies, whatever. So what is the end game? By doing this stuff, by doing this action, by acting this way, do I bring more joy to my life? Do I bring more fulfillment to my life, or am I making myself more miserable? And I'm doing that because society presses me to do. The algorithm tells me that's the way I should behave, because I live in a place where being busy is more important than actually have a purpose in what I do. But it's a you process. It's a you problem. It's literally a you problem.
I can think of a couple. Okay, so everybody's seen, a 12-year-old boy runs up to a 12-year-old girl, hits her, turns around, runs away. And if you ask him why he did that, he's going to tell you he doesn't know, and he really doesn't know. All of us knows why he did that. He did that because he likes her and he doesn't know how to express it. Now, as we get older, we figure that out, but there's a whole bunch more that we don't know. And the amount that we actually know about our own motivations is staggeringly small. If you take a look at the field of psychology, we're learning every day how much we don't know about our own behavior, our own motivations, how and why we do things. So I think Fabio is talking a bit more about that. And I'll give a personal example. One day, small example, it's not about my life or life. It is about life. I was with my family and we're going through Central Park, and I see a man, a woman, and a child, and the child is small, maybe 7 years old, and the man is beating the child, and we're stunned. Nobody seems to be doing anything about it. It's maybe a little bit of a bystander effect. Everybody's like, well, somebody else is going to do something about it. My wife starts calling 911. He's beating the child over what appears to be a disciplinary issue. So it's not just he ran up to the woman is half scared, half this is what you get for, and my initial instinct was to rush in and stop the man, but my children are there, and I'm like, what happens if he's armed? What happens if I get killed? What happens can I stop him? Am I even morally? I mean, and that is and the decision I made was to do nothing. My wife called 911, so I'm sitting there doing nothing but watching, and that is for me something that I have to re-examine and go back and say, did I? Now, the problem is I can't go back and see what would have happened if I had engaged in some way. What if I had just yelled at the guy, hey, fucking stop it? What if I just, brought back my shoulders and attempted to just intimidate him into stopping? It's not that, I mean, if we got into, you understand what I'm saying. So I don't know. There's an example of something that I've had friends who say, well, why do you even bother thinking about that? Well, because I think there is a tremendous amount about personality that's tied up into what happened there. How would I have acted differently if I had been alone? How would I have acted differently if I was 10 years younger versus 10 years older? And what does that say about who I am as a person? I don't have an answer to any of those questions, but I think about it.
If I may suggest, you should have shouted, "Hey, I'm watching here!" Sorry, I couldn't resist that joke.
So I didn't mean to bring this whole thing to a standstill.
No, you didn't. You didn't.
No,
You didn't.
actually, it was Simos. I was gonna say something, and then as soon as he said that, gone.
Oh,
disappeared
I am
from my-
never so pleased as when we get to blame Simos.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I deserve it, of course. I'm an optimist, so I'm sure it's all my fault.
I
Yeah,
wanted to
cognitive
ask real.
dissonance again. Good.
Yeah, I wanted to ask real quick. The question comes up. Well, would you go back and do things differently? And then the question always comes up. If you could go back, would you be the same person to do things differently in the first place? Right? You have that whole, was it the paradox going on and everything? So yeah, second guessing is always difficult, but it is how we shape ourselves to think, what will I do if I run into this again?
Well, and I mean, history doesn't repeat itself, but it certainly rhymes. I mean, I've encountered injustices since then. I've encountered, we've all seen injustices. We've all let some slide. We've all let others go, and we've all had different reasons for how and why we do it. And we don't even trust our own reasons. I have to ask myself, what I feel was like the straw on the camel's back of my not engaging was that my kids were there. I was like, well, I don't even know what that means. Does that mean that I don't want them to maybe see their dad get his ass handed to him in front of does that mean that, they see the example of, oh, well, if you see something going wrong, just pretend like it's not happening. I don't, the entire thing is one incident that echoes because we've all seen a boss who is so cruel to his employees, and usually the ones who can emotionally least afford it, who have the fewest spoons. We've all seen the bullies, we've all seen so I think there's people who, broadly speaking, I think what we're talking about here is people who react to that versus people who think about the reactions to that and how they comprehend. Because I've seen people who say, well, I just did it on instinct, I just did whatever. They didn't examine it, they just did it. And I again, it's a spectrum. I don't think it's a black or white, but I think there is in any situation, there's always a segment of people who say, I am who I am, I did what I did, we're done, let's move on to the next thing. And a group of people who sit there and won't say, I want to understand how and why, because this isn't the last time I'm going to see this.
My son came home one evening with 2 black eyes. I was like, dude, what happened? He said, man, this guy got jumped. And he said, I just reacted and I, went up, tried to do something. My son's pretty big guy. He played the O-line in football and everything. He's a big boy. So he figured he could handle himself. But of course, this dude was a much better fighter than he was. And yeah, popped him right in the nose, right? And, but, moral character, sure, I think he did the right thing. But, it could have gone bad. He could have just kept pummeling him, you know what I mean? And it could have gone bad really fast. So, yeah, I mean, good guy for, stepping in. But, yeah, you've got to consider your own, like you said, should you call the cops and not get beat up, right?
Well, it's not just that. I'm trying to remember. There's a reasonably famous guy, and I can't remember who it was, but who tried to intervene into a bar fight and got stabbed.
Right. Yeah.
And it's not the Stephen King actually wrote a book because a friend of his died that way, but that's not the example I'm thinking about. But the Stand By Me, Stephen King wrote when he saw the obituary of a friend of his who got stabbed trying to break up a bar fight. He had nothing. He didn't know any of the people involved and was killed for it.
Yeah. And that's, again, not a parent. And I think of parents every once in a while. And like, how do you teach that to kids? Like, for instance, I'm not going to say who it is that I know, but one of their kids got in trouble for something very similar to that at school, where their kid was defending somebody else. And talking to this person that I know, it's very difficult for them and trying to teach this kid, like you don't get violent. Like, yes, in some ways that was the right thing, but like also like the teacher was right to punish you, and like you deserve the punishment that you're given, even though you didn't necessarily do the wrong thing. How do you teach that to a kid?
Yeah, that's a whopper.
Yeah, there you go. Pragmatism versus idealism, I guess. But you teach them
Well,
philosophy. That's the answer,
I
because then they
think
can at least examine their life.
There you go.
Before you go on, Brian, I just want to say hello to Green Soul. Hi, Frank. How you
Hey,
doing?
I'm doing all right. Can
Thank
you
you
hear
so
me?
much for coming back here.
Yeah,
Is there
You're
anything you
welcome.
want to add at this particular juncture? Because I know this is a topic that interests you.
I'm a hardcore pragmatist. That's the best way I could say examine life. I examined my life, as coming out of high school, learning about different things, and I throughout the years I just found out that I was a pragmatist because in the way that I view like language and thoughts as tools for like problem solving and action. Like if there's a certain philosophy that gravitates to you and it helps you, then I could say, yeah, it's practical. But as far as yeah, it's beneficial, but do you have the cognitive tools to actually examine your life in the first place? So um, I take a pragmatist view when it comes to examining my life. And I went through like stuff like Greek philosophy to existentialism, and I learned a lot, and I benefited a lot. And as if I'm calling myself a pragmatist, I take a lot of those ideas and apply them into my life. And if I find it's working for me, then as a whole, it's beneficial. I'm just speaking for myself.
Yeah. No, that's good. You were also interested in psychology, you're not, Frank? Is that right?
Oh, I'm in the field.
Yeah. So, how do you find that this unexamined life versus the examined life? Is there some psychological explanation for who does what? Are some people more?
It's all contingent upon how that person grew up and how that person, maneuver, what reinforced that person to actually have, protect the actions that person takes. You see what I'm saying? Like, it's all contingent upon the person's, of course, cognitive level and how that person grew up, and how what influences that person, what motivates that person. So, like, yeah, we could examine, we examine our lives, but do we have the tools to do that? And what are we doing to actually examine ourselves?
Therapy.
And what should we examine? Sometimes it's therapy, and sometimes it's just like eating eggs. Just have a healthy diet.
Yeah.
I think in
Therapy is
Europe,
not for everyone.
in Europe,
Yeah.
we call that talking to friends, I think.
Or
talking to
put
friends
on
too.
some Black Sabbath and just let it all melt away, right?
Yeah.
You had me at Black Sabbath. You had me there.
All right.
I
All right.
do
Well-
think though that sometimes just talking to friends or just watching YouTube videos or whatever can lead people in a direction that's not healthy. I
Yeah,
do
course.
think
sure.
that you can get into certain echo chambers where the feedback is not, shall we say, no, that wasn't a nice thing to say, but yeah, not healthy. We'll just go with not healthy.
Yeah, but that's where the philosophy comes in, isn't it? Because if you've been taught, reason, logic, epistemology, these kind of subjects, then you've got the tools with which to examine or at least to question the kind of information that's coming in, and to try to dig deeper into it to find out whether it's useful to you or not. And I think it's that digging, right? Yeah, we all recognize we've got something to learn. I'm saying, and that this is where I think pragmatism falls down to some degree, because although it may be a patch for the life that you're leading, is it really getting to the infection? Not necessarily. And I think that's where idealism, in some sense, can really pay benefits. You said for instance, Frank, you went through the existential period and questioning that
Mhm.
and finding
Mhm.
that was very useful, and then applying that to your life. I think that's the point about it, philosophy,
Mhm.
which is it gives you the tools to try and dig deeper and deeper.
Sure.
I
And
think
that's go ahead, Flavio.
no, sorry. I just want to say that I think it's a chain of events. I totally agree with Frank that uh, 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 where you live, the culture you be living in, the kind of exposure you had will make you more subject to questioning your life choices and all this stuff. One thing I want to point out is that you guys be talking about the tools. The tools come later. There is the drive to question yourself, and then eventually you ask yourself, okay, what do I need to question my life choices? Is there anything I can relate to, stuff like that? And then you start
Yeah.
looking for the tools. You don't get the tools and then you question yourself. That's what I meant.
I think that it kind of depends on what you consider to be tools, because I think that there are tools that sort of open us up to questioning ourselves.
Tools, yeah. I mean, I'm saying that in the most generic possible way. Okay, so you guys said rightly so. What one tool might also be talking to people. Okay, cool, that's a tool. And trust me, not all the person know how to talk with people. So
Right.
if they think that's a tool, they develop that tool. They find the right people. They learn to ask the right questions. They learn to fucking listen to the answers, which is another tool that people lack a lot, in my opinion, nowadays. I don't know.
Well,
So yeah, but
Yeah, I would take that on board, but I forgot to listen to it. So
yeah, no.
Well, what
Right.
I was going to say is that I think that there's an issue when people confuse those different types of tools, right? Like it's, for instance, we were talking about psychology. I was thinking of a certain psychology channel that I watch on YouTube where it is a licensed psychologist who like reacts to like reality TV. And
Sorry, go ahead.
for me watching, it was a tool in that I was able to like watch the sort of reality TV in a format that I wouldn't normally watch. Like, thank you, YouTube. But watching that, I was able to like recognize some of my own behaviors in that and say, oh, like, hey, like this couple and like the issues that they're having, like I sort of couldn't see where my behaviors might have mirrored that. Whereas I also could have watched that and said, oh, well, yeah, like that's identifying all of these problem behaviors in my past partners. And like, that's why they were pieces of shit and that sort of thing. But even once I identified that, again, this is how I use this tool. I then still had to like go on to do the work to like, for me, go to therapy and like work on those behaviors and examine, okay, now this pattern of behavior, how do I change that pattern of behavior? How do I address that? Because the work was not done when the video was over.
So I understand where you're coming from, but I think there is I see an issue in what you said. Maybe it's just me. The thing is that you don't know the tools. The first thing you have to realize is that you don't know. Okay, that's the first step in order for you to start questioning your life choices. So once you accept it and you internalize that you don't know, the first thing what follows is that you don't know which tool do you need to fix or examine whatever the fuck you want to examine. So this is where I think the flow in what you were saying, unless I misunderstood you completely, because when you say, oh yeah, I do that, and then I start talk with people or watch YouTube videos, okay, hold your horses, because if you say that, okay, I'm watching a video to get the tool, you're making it wrong, because you don't know which tool you need. So first you've got to study what are the tools. You got to talk with people with more experience with you and acquire the tools. Okay, because if not, everything if you only have a hammer, everything. You can't fix everything with a hammer. You know what I mean? So if you have a problem, you need a tool. Okay, what the fuck is the tool to fix that one? You need somebody to tell you which tool you use.
Or you pick them up during the course of your
Yeah.
life, sort of progressively.
Yeah.
I mean, you start life as a kid, and you've got a rubber hammer and a rubber screwdriver that your parents give you, and
Figure
you
out which
use
ones work
those
for
as much
what.
as you can, and then you run into a situation where they don't work as well, or you're not getting the results that you want from using those tools. So you go and maybe dig around in your dad's toolbox, or you go and rummage around in your mum's dresses,
And
or
that is the worst possible way you can live your life. Grabbing something that you don't know how it works and
Yeah.
figure out how it works. That
I'm
is
gonna take this
have-
chainsaw.
But I think that's how
error.
most people go
Trial
through
and-
life for
trial
quite a
and
few
Yeah.
Yeah, but
years.
listen, the fact that people do that every time, it doesn't make it right.
Yeah.
It still
No,
make it
but
wrong.
we
I
learn
think
more
we need
from
to-
our mistakes than we do anything else.
We have to figure out how to use a tool, because sometimes a tool
Yeah.
could be like a cigarette when you need to calm
Exactly.
down.
Exactly.
So
Yeah.
like,
My
So-
boys used up a lot of wood and screws and nails, and it's like, but I would teach them how to do things, but then I would step back and my wife would say something. I was like, let them go. They got to learn how to
Yeah.
do
Yeah,
something
exactly.
and split the
Exactly.
Pick it
wood.
up,
And
try
why
it,
did the
gotta
wood
hit-
try
split?
something else.
Gotta hit
Yeah,
the thumb
right.
occasionally.
Yep.
You
But
gotta
I-
hit the thumb occasionally.
What
Yeah,
did Miss
teach
Griggle
them safety
say?
glasses and keep your loose clothing away. I go through all the rules, but then at some point you have to trust them with the big boy tools.
Yeah, so
Exactly.
this is a very good point about philosophy as well, because the number of people I see that are maybe 3 or 4 years into learning philosophy who just think that it's going to give you the answer. Philosophy gives you the answer. Like
No,
that's
it
why
gives you
there's
the
a God.
questions.
That's why there's a God, because here's the Kalam.
Yeah.
This is a theological stroke philosophical, and it gives you, look, the conclusion says God, and it's necessary because it's a deductive argument. Therefore, it must be true because I think it's sound.
Yeah.
Of course, this is how it's, this is
And then
another
there's
fallacy.
paying attention.
Well, yeah, that may be the case, but the point being here is that it takes years to get to the point where you finally go, oh, hang on a minute. This I thought this was solid ground. It's not solid ground. It's just a deductive argument, and it depends on whether I think that the premises are true, whether or not the conclusion is necessarily true, right? And that just
absolutely,
takes
yeah.
years to get to, and some people don't even get through it because they can't weather the ground of uncertainty, shall we say, and embrace that. And this comes down to the examined life again. This is why you're examining it. Even philosophy, you have to keep examining and keep questioning in order to find out whether you're on solid ground or not.
Bingo.
And this is, this is that, and you only get that like from years and years. I said earlier in this hangout, look, when I talk to people that have twice the length in philosophy as me, I find when I think I know I'm on solid ground because I don't know the answer or something like that, they turn around to me and say, oh, hang on a minute. No, you're incorrect there because here's another way to look at it, a deeper way to look at it. There's more positions than you realize. There's this position called I don't know-ism. And there you go. If you knew what that was, you wouldn't be saying with such certainty what you're saying now. And so it's amazing how
Ooh.
deep this goes.
Yes,
and when
and you just
No, but you're right.
you've
I mean,
just- I've just smacked my face on another concept that I think people have to be wary of when they're doing this philosophy thing, and that is positionalism. The turn screw, the positionalism, because Kant said this, everything, you just can't, because Kant. And it's like, huh? What? How about no?
Yeah,
It's like,
absolutely. Even Kant couldn't.
yeah, even Kant can't.
Mm.
You know,
There you
not
go.
comprehensively.
Kant's a cunt.
Yeah, for something. I know that.
But do you get my point? It's like people stand on these positions as though they're these
Be all and end all. Yeah.
Yeah.
yeah,
It's- and
these
that's
bastions, these philosophical bastions.
and
And
that's
it's
because
just-
they grab the first tool that they find, the one that they find more appealing, and they use it for everything.
Yep.
I mean,
Exactly.
Just remember,
the-
everyone,
the
every
world-
tool's a hammer.
Find
You
out
swing it hard
different
enough.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, listen,
Right.
the world is full of fucking amateurs, okay? And we all deal
Oh,
with that
hang on a
when
minute.
somebody comes to your place and fixes stuff and they have no idea what to do. Now, a boiler, it's a little bit
Exactly.
different than my life. If I start questioning my life and my life choices, okay, I don't want to act as a fucking amateur with my fucking life. So the first thing I do is I either study and say, okay, what do I need to know to try to find the answer to the question that I pose to myself? And I start digging and I start asking people that might know a little bit more about it. And that's where I try to acquire the right tool for the right thing. I mean, I don't go on the fucking internet and watch The First Idiot, which is probably talking about something which has something which I think it might relate to what I might think and the answer I could like. I mean, fuck no. I mean, this is not the way to live your life. I mean, you're a fucking moron if you do that.
Well, speaking of
I don't know. I
pragmatism,
run right to Simos. I
Oh yeah. Well, that's your
There
number
you
one
go.
mistake. There you go. That's your number one mistake. By
No
the way,
pressure,
everybody,
no pressure.
yeah, everybody buy Manscaped. We're sponsored by them with new ball temp app.
Yeah.
Okay. Go ahead, Nick. You were going to say
Oh,
something.
no, I was going to say, Simos, you know the question that is most commonly asked by philosophers?
Oh, is it this?
No.
No, it's
That's
not
the-
that one. Okay.
Yeah.
I've heard that asked a lot, but
Yeah,
not
yeah.
by the question most commonly asked by philosophers is, would you like fries with that?
Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, I thought it was. Didn't you order a latte? That was
Yeah,
another.
yeah, that's another.
I
Would you
got you
like a
mis-
bag for that?
Would you like a bag for that? Yeah.
Do you need a receipt?
I see. I see.
You have napkins.
Well, you got to
Yeah.
peer review that first. And then-
Yeah. Free peer review. Oh, a classic. In its time, absolute classic.
yeah.
Okay, before we go down too much of the politics again, I just want to say, thank you, bag of fries. Yes, there you go. Gio got it right. Yeah, I mean, okay, so one of the points is getting complacent here, isn't it? That's what it is. Is that you found a tool, you managed to use it once, and you think that that's the tool for you that's going to do everything. And of course, they're all very individual. They're all very specialized, and especially in philosophy. So I do think that the more I've gone on in my philosophical inquiries, the more times I've come to changing my mind. I'm this week I'm a dualist. This week I'm an idealist. This week I'm a materialist. This week I'm a naturalist. Oh no, naturalism's wrong. It must be physicalism. And I don't know what the difference between any of these are anymore because I've changed to so many different positions that I can't remember the first position I had. The only thing I can remember is that the stuff that the original views that I held when I didn't know what they were are probably the ones that I still hold today. And the reason for that, of course, is when you find a tool, in this case philosophy, you tend to use it to justify your presuppositions. And of course, your presuppositions, by which I'm talking about unjustified positions. And in some sense, this is the point about examining and questioning everything that you're doing. You have to keep on digging and keep on getting to new ideas, and to get to at least some idea of where you should be. And I don't even know if you can, because I've only been doing philosophy for whatever it is, I don't know, 10 years maybe, and that is by no means long enough to really express any kind of views which are necessarily solid, shall we say. I'm not even sure any views can be solid, by the way, but that's because I'm still in this transition period. And again, going back to the counter-apologetics, thank you for Frank. I think it was Frank that said that. Like that is, in some sense, how I've tried to use philosophy to do counter-apologetics. But of course, as I've gone on, the more, instead of arguing against, religion as such, which I found to be fairly useless, I've used it more in terms of recognizing that their arguments don't work and giving me some motivation as to how their arguments don't work. What are the flaws in the particular arguments, the kalam or the ontological or the make shit up argument, which I get a lot of these days. So yeah, there you go. Hello, Speckle. By the way, if you want to join, please do. Of course.
Yeah. So just to just to counter some of that, you cannot change my emotional positions.
Right.
Yeah. So I have a lot of emotional positions when it
So
comes
you're saying
to us.
those are the ones.
Spirituality.
Those are the ones you learn when you're young. You mean?
Those
That
are
are very
ones not just learned but developed through time.
developed.
What's
Okay.
what's an emotional position?
Well, these are more spiritual positions because I am a theist, so I have, you could say that I'm an agnostic theist.
Yeah.
So
Aren't we all agnostics, really?
yeah.
And I think I can prove that. But let me just
Ugh,
refer
I was
to a
waiting.
particular Venn diagram that shows that everybody is an agnostic. Yeah, I don't know. I think appeal to authority is always going to be fallacious. It almost doesn't matter how you do it. All you can say is use it as shorthand for the evidence, and in those circumstances, it can be acceptable. But very rarely, of course, are you actually referring to the authority itself. You'll tend to be, if it's used genuinely as a good argument, you're actually referring to the arguments that are made by that authority, not the authority itself. And that's one of the important things that I learned when I first learned of the appeal to authority fallacy. I was like, oh, okay, yeah, fair enough. But if you appeal to somebody who, is recognized as an expert, then they must be right. And of course, that's wrong. That's just flat out wrong. It's the data that they are putting forward that you're appealing to, really. So that's why appeal to God is always fallacious. Anyway, that's personal opinion there.
I wonder if artists have these type of arguments, of which art is best.
How do you mean? Artists.
Artists like painters and people who actually do art.
Right.
Like if
musicians versus
musicians, yeah. Like I wonder if they have these type of arguments.
I would imagine a lot of them have these type of arguments in that, with themselves all the time.
Well, with
That's a
each
good
other
point.
as well. So there was a couple of
And
Italian
each other,
Renaissance.
yes, but
There was a couple of Italian Renaissance painters which absolutely hated each other. Who did the Sistine Chapel, Fabio? Come back to us, Fabio. You need it. Italian expert.
Sistine Chapel was Michelangelo.
I know. That's just what Fabio said.
Yeah.
Michelangelo. So Michelangelo versus the other guy, Raphael, I think it might have been.
Well, I mean, Michelangelo hated Bernini, for example. Yeah, I mean, they pretty much hate each other.
Yeah.
But So
The
well,
point
I
being
mean,
is they argued over what was the correct way to paint an angel. This is the point I was making.
well, yeah.
And obviously,
Very
you know,
important. This is very important. Steve.
Yes,
I
it
mean,
is. I'm actually
sounds like something
fascinated.
we would cover on Saturday.
It's something I'm
Well-
going to read about this weekend, actually.
I think they were both theists, but one of them was a very happy theist, shall we say.
Whatever the KJV in English says, because otherwise it's
Mm.
wrong.
Yeah,
Yeah,
absolutely.
they mostly hated each other because they were, because of money problems. It's not really, but
Oh, it
Right.
always comes down to the money.
I know, right?
Always.
The bloody
but
Medicis, that's
titanium
the
white
problem.
versus lead white for the wings. I mean, come on.
Hello, Speckle. How you doing?
Thanks, Spackle.
Hey, Speckle.
Good,
Hi.
how are
Hey,
you?
Spackle.
Hmm. I'm
I
okay.
was just Greensill was talking about an emotional position or a spiritual position and why it's hard to kind of move that. Well, there's books about this that humans actually make choices based on their emotions and then rationalize it later. And as much as humans love to think they're just
Yep.
so rational, there is a bias at always, and also our intuition pushes us in directions. And so then you have to try to counter that. And that is very difficult to do if you're emotionally attached to the issue. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it's definitely irrational.
That was
I agree.
there was
Uh,
a study
yeah.
that was, I can't remember, it was people with like a certain type of like brain damage, but that was what that was based on, where they would, I forget how it was that they would like basically tell them to do something. I don't remember if it was like written on a piece of paper where they like saw it with one eye or something. It was something weird like that because it was a specific type of brain damage where like they did not know like what the thing was telling them to do, and then they would be
Oh,
like,
are you
okay, go
talking
whatever.
about? Are you talking about? They also did experiments where they severed the left and right brain hemispheres.
I think it was people who like already had like some specific disorder where they had to do
Yeah,
that.
there is a. I forget
they
what
did
it's
a study
called.
with
There is a disorder where the treatment is to sever
Yeah.
the hemispheres, and they
And-
found that the two hemispheres don't actually communicate a lot of stuff with each other, but a
But
lot
they-
of stuff they have to.
Yeah.
Otherwise, it's just not known.
But it was interesting, like the one experiment that they did, I think they probably did a bunch of experiments with this group of people. It sounds like an interesting group of people to like do experiments on if they're like down with it, right? If you can do it ethically. But I forgot how it was, like they told one side of the brain without like telling the other side of the brain, and then they would ask them like, why did you do X, Y, and Z? And they
sounds
would
familiar.
have reasons for it. And they would like create a reason that like sounded logical based on like whatever. It's like, well, there was this, that, and the other, and therefore I thought of this.
Yeah, it's like
and
they fill in the gaps, right?
exactly.
Yeah, they fill in the gaps. Yeah, I heard about this study. Yeah.
I
Yeah,
wish I
I've-
could
I've-
remember
I've-
the specifics of
Me
it.
too. I can't
Uh-huh.
remember the names either. But
Yeah,
yeah, that condition where they sever the hemispheres, yeah, that's fascinating in itself.
Yeah.
I think it's a severe treatment to epilepsy. They sever the corpus callosum. That's the part.
Is it epilepsy?
Okay.
Well,
Maybe.
epilepsy is the one that I know most. That it's severe epilepsy. They sever the corpus callosum, and I remember the study. Now I'm starting to remember the study, but it's been a while since Psych 101.
Yeah. Could
There was
well
some
be
like
epilepsy.
wild side effects. I remember like the one guy, like he would, when he was like getting dressed for the day, like his non-dominant hand would like start unbuttoning his shirt, like
Yeah,
like that
I
kind of
remember
stuff, where
that.
it was like it really did like wreak havoc in their life. But like for some people, it was literally the only treatment for whatever their condition was.
It's funny to hear people trying to fill the gaps about an experiment where they cut the brain. and they fill the gaps.
Right? We're all trying to fill in the gaps.
Yeah, I know. Well, yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
well, that's-
when we
that's
talk about
kind of the
mind
whole-
and brain, though, yeah, we bring up that when you have damage to the brain, it affects the mind. So the mind
Yep.
must be part of the brain.
There was in Chicago, they had a Star Trek convention, and shortly after the convention, there was a big hubbub because there was a hospital in Chicago that asked for Klingon translators to work at the hospital. And it turns out somebody at the convention had gotten hit in the head and lost all languages that he learned naturally. But he had learned the entire Klingon language after the age of 12. And so, because that's stored in a completely different part of the brain, he could still speak Klingon. That's all they could speak. So they had to actually ask for a Klingon translator to help explain to this guy what was going on, because he had lost all the languages that he learned naturally.
And somebody called their parents up and said, "See, I told you the degree in Klingon would pay off."
Right. But that
I'm working at
happened
a hospital.
again recently to a kid who he like learned Chinese in high school, and again had was in an accident, had a weird brain injury, had zero concept of English when he woke up, like did not understand what people were saying to him, could not speak a word of English, and happened to have one of like the orderlies was an immigrant and was just like talking to herself because she knew that like this guy couldn't talk and couldn't understand people, and he like responded to her and like said a couple of words, and it started with that, and he was able to understand her, I think, right away. But then it was like first he was able to speak Mandarin and understand speak, and then he was able to like get his English back. It took time, but yeah,
That's
was
wild.
Yeah. See, I had my own language dump, as it were, back in the 90s with ME, myalgic encephalomyelitis, which you Americans know as chronic post-viral fatigue syndrome.
Yeah.
And I lost all of my programming languages, which was kind of the exact opposite of what happened to the Klingon guy. I lost all of the stuff that I learnt after a certain age, but yeah, basic linguistic skills, native tongue, still got that. Still got bits of German, French, Spanish, but programming languages all gone. Certainly, you know, the syntaxes, the logic structures and that side of things. Yes, I managed to retain those, but the actual languages, you know, basic C++, Fortran, Pascal, all of those gone.
How old were you when you got ME, or that you realized something was like that?
Well, I was first diagnosed with it in the late 80s, which would have been my late 20s.
Okay.
But it
That's young.
it
Dang.
became a problem for me in my 30s. I kind of lost the majority of my 30s to it. Struggled back and managed to return to a programming, software engineering, programming career in my 40s, and then had the rug pulled again in 2010. But I was in my 30s when the major language dump happened, and that was when I came up with the substitute mechanism for keeping conversations going, because I realized that nothing grinds a conversation to a halt than when you're searching for a word that you can't find. So I developed this method of throwing in a substitute word that was, by its nature and design, just completely the wrong word to ever be in that position. So that it would act as a marker to the people that I'm talking to, that there's a word that I've lost here, but in context it should be fairly obvious for you to fill in. And it worked very, very well. So well that Michael, Agent of Doubt, mocks me for it still today.
Aw.
Which is fine. It works. But
Like
yeah,
good
unless you
nature,
know
then
about it, suddenly encountering the word cauliflower in a context when it's like, what the fuck did he say cauliflower for?
I
And
like it.
it there are very few contexts I find where the word cauliflower sits naturally, and most of them are culinary.
Okay. Couple of questions
You're
for
talking
you.
about oh, 1 second. I just want a clarification, and then if you can.
Sure.
So when you can't find the word and you do like a substitute, you
Yeah.
can't even use a substitute. It's not a. I'm just trying to understand. You can't substitute fantastic with great, for instance.
You could, but
Cinnamon out now. I can't talk.
yeah,
I think the
yeah,
idea is that it's so out of character, that it's so obviously not the word that's being used there, that it's just
Right.
saying, hey, there's I'm missing the word that goes here, but you can fill it
Oh, I
in.
was just saying, but you could also, instead of saying cauliflower,
if you could think of it, yes.
if you can exchange. Okay.
Yeah, and ideally, I would use a cinnamon. Cinnamon?
No, I know. I can't say
Synonym.
it either.
A synonym.
Now I want a synonym bun.
You're right.
Obviously, if one can think of a synonym, then one would use that. But if all else fails, to keep the conversation momentum going, cauliflower works just as well. It could
Yeah.
just as easily be broccoli or banana.
Luigi.
Anything but cauliflower. That's it's just bloody awful. It really is. I've tried. I have tried, and it's oh so good for you and everything else. And it's like
Probably any
the
type of
extra
food would
year or
work,
two
right?
on the end of my life just isn't worth cauliflower.
Yeah, I agree.
I
Hard
agree
agree.
with that.
But
Unless
fine,
it's baked
fine.
into something, maybe like cauliflower crust is actually not that bad.
You know,
find a lot
I
of
love vegetables, but there are just some that I just say, look, I eat all the rest of them. Okay, give me a pass on this one, right?
Right. So there you go. You see, it's very rare even to come up in culinary discussions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you've just you've just elected it as the ideal substitute word, even stronger.
There you go.
So there you go. Yeah. But yeah, so
That is one context where you can use it that's not culinary. Correct. But
well, I
come up
get
with
the
another one.
cauliflower ear. Yeah.
Yeah.
I
Come up
suppose.
with another one. Because how often do you talk about cauliflower ear? I had a dog with
Exactly.
cauliflower ear, and also watched a lot of boxing. Still didn't really come up that often, really.
Oh, there you
I
go.
will say it did come up more often than culinary applications when I had that dog that with the cauliflower ear. But
Yeah. So even for a vegetable.
Mrs. Desk is always pushing things, right? And the other weekend I had to try turnips, and I don't like turnips either.
Yeah, turnips are
Did
gross.
she mash them?
I love turnips.
I
I thought I hated them when I was a kid, but
she
it turns
baked
out I
them
just
with
like
she baked them with potatoes and parsnips and all that in a pan.
Well, what you could
Parsnips.
try is to mash them up with potatoes and carrots, maybe, or
Carrots would be good with
parsnips.
I don't know. That's the one thing. That's one thing. My wife is her specialty is her mashed potatoes. She gets
Well,
them so perfect and smooth, and it's just
Well,
go with potatoes.
mashed
She's got the
root
touch.
vegetables. Mashed root vegetables can be just as good as mashed potatoes, and turnips mash good. Turnip, swede, yam, sweet potato.
I like sweet
Potatoes.
potatoes.
sweet.
You
I'm
know.
a
They
sweet
are
potato
all
fan.
good for mashing.
So, a couple of questions for you, Brian. I just out of
Okay.
curiosity, was it harder or easier to learn to code the second time? Is one question.
Easier, because I had a lot of the basic structures, and when it comes to syntax, yeah, you've got the internet.
You were
It's
able to
very
keep some
great.
of the
It's very
oh.
good research tool. And
Oh.
nowadays, a lot of the text editors that you use when you're coding will do things like automatically indent for you, or once you start typing a command word, it'll give you a list of suggestions.
So you
with
have more
autocomplete,
resources
so-
now.
Sorry?
So you have more resources have come further.
Yeah, the resources were there, and now it's even easier because you can get AI to do the grunt work, and you just go through and fix it.
Okay.
Yeah, you're
Okay.
giving away trade secrets here.
And
Yeah.
getting back to
And
the
Mike Pillow's
topic of
dissertation
the
or
stream.
legal brief.
Yeah, I'm not condoning it. I'm just pointing out, seeing as we're
Oh, that's
talking
great.
about tools, the tools are out there.
Do you think that your general philosophical outlook of the world, your life, etc., changed? Were there any big changes during that time?
For me,
Yeah.
What now versus then?
Before the illness.
Oh, before the illness. Oh, right,
Yeah.
we're still talking about that. Not really, because I haven't really put the illness under a philosophical magnifying glass.
You haven't examined it. Okay.
I haven't examined it
Interesting.
in that way. It's just been a case of, all right, this is the new normal. How do we move forward? I mean, yeah, the only real thought I've had to put into it is adjusting to the new normal. And most of that has been pragmatic and utilitarian thinkage.
Mm-hmm.
There's not really a lot of qualia to be examined other than the loss of it, and who really wants to go down that spiral?
So I learned that word koalia in Alive, and when somebody said it, they said it wrong, and it sounded like koalas, and I was like, "What are you talking about, koalas?" I'm like, what?
Yeah, it's that qualia experience in Australia. You get okay, to take us back to the
Thank you,
topic.
Brian.
I think
Yes,
we've been
please
going-
do,
going-
please do.
Thank you, you're very welcome.
I've been under the microscope long enough.
That's fair enough. Qualia bears. There you go. Yeah, so I think we've been going 2 hours, so I think that's probably quite long enough. We will continue off air. If anybody wants to come in and go in just the off air portion, please please join when you can. However, I'd just like to go around the panel on final thoughts, if I may, and see how we're going. Speckle, over to you. Final thoughts on the topic. Are there any benefits to philosophy and the examined life?
Absolutely. I think exploring purpose and meaning and your desires and competing desires and how things work and why people think the way they do and all sorts of things. I think it's worth it. And I think it's worth it to explore what you actually believe. Because then you can compare. I'm going to steal what Ozzy says. You can compare roadmaps, and sometimes that's quite helpful because you end up shifting, your beliefs a little bit because you realize, oh, that makes way more sense than this. And I just think it's a good thing. I don't know why there's people that don't. I think most people engage in philosophy and they don't realize it. Like they'll say, "Oh, I hate philosophy," but then it's in everything. It's in books and it's in movies and everything. You can't escape it really. So I think people are engaged more than they think. But Yeah, I think it's important to examine your life, and I think it can help directionally in what you do, with it.
Okay, thank you so much. Over to you, Frank.
Yeah. Stay away from Ayn Rand philosophy. That's basically what as for examination of your life, it's a journey, and definitely there is a great benefit to going into these things. So that's basically what I have a lot of introspection, a lot of things I learned, and for me, it's a great benefit. That's all I have to say.
Okay, over to you, Nick.
The unexamined life is not worth living. That's all I have to say.
That's intense.
Yeah. Okay. Well, yeah. Well, we know the quote. Thank you very much, Nick. Dave.
I would say yes, it is worth exploring, but like a lot of us have pointed out, though, everybody's at different levels of that, and there's many different levels of exploring enough that it's meaningful to your life.
Okay. Excellent. Minnow.
Who is John Galt? No, I'm just kidding. I think that Dave keeps just saying what I was thinking before I am able to say it. But yeah, I think that, yeah, like the hole, the bottom of it, you reach the bottom when you stop digging.
All hail Bigfoot, you know. It's by the power of Bigfoot that we're just linked together. We're manifesting together here on Simos Stream.
There you go.
Simos knows what I'm talking about.
Oh yes, all hail Bigfoot. Yes. Yeah. Fabio, over to you.
Yeah, I would say that there is great value. It's dangerous, as with everything, must be done right. But I think it's the only tool that everybody has to at least start questioning their own assumptions, and it's kind of like an antidote, to especially the living that we live right now, because most of the time seems to be that we live on kind of on autopilot. We just follow people, tribalism, all the things we discussed before. It's a good tool, to again start questioning. Yeah, but why?
Thank you very much. Headless. Shall I come to you last?
No, I'll say it now.
Okay.
If you're going to collect tools, learn to use them. Don't just collect them.
Yeah.
That's a good one.
I like
Thank you very much. And Brian, finally.
Yeah, I basically finish as I started. It's with regards the importance of knowing how to think over what to think. When it comes to how to think, philosophy and the examined life are good tools to make sure that your thinking muscle is muscling properly, and your critical thinking tools are sharp and properly angled. Yeah.
Okay.
How to think, not what to think.
Thank you so much. How to think, not what to think. I think that's a very good kind of summation of it. Philosophy, love of wisdom.
Oh, and paying attention, of course.
Philosophy, the love of wisdom, can never be bad. However, it does take a long time to learn wisdom. That's why it's a gift given to the old and not the young. And also, the examined life, just for me, just means looking over your shoulder and recognizing where you've been, and then applying that to thinking about a path in the future. So for me, that's the benefits of it. And I want to thank everybody for coming on this panel. Nick, it's great to see you. Really is. Miss having you around. Frank, thanks very much. Speckle, thanks very much. Minnow, thanks very much. Dave, thanks very much. Fabio, not so much. Headless chicken. Great. So you can say the word at the end if you want. And
I can say it now.
Simo says
no,
he's gonna
when we
say
get
that.
to the end. When we
Oh,
get
when
to
we
the
get to the end. Okay.
end.
Let me know
He's
when we
saying
get to
that
the end.
I think Maudy's live with an interview. And just wanted to let you know.
Okay, everybody head over to Mouty's channel after this if you don't, or you can get on, and there'll be more value. There'll be more discussion and disputes amongst Dave. Thank you very much, Brian. As always, it's a pleasure to see you, and we'll be on next week with another topic. Although what the topic will probably be something to do with apologetics. I should think next week. So look out for that. And
it's either going to be apologetics or old motorcycles. So it's still deciding.
Me and Sufi are gonna work our apologetics on y'all.
For which we apologize in advance.
Yeah, fair enough. Okay.